Hey, good Friday afternoon, everybody. Brian Bledsoe with you here, host of the Desert Farmer Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. First and foremost, I want to say I know the last couple of episodes of the Desert Farmer Podcast might be a little bit more lengthy than what you're used to or what you really want to sit through. But a couple of things about that. There's just so much material to get through, and I want to be as transparent as possible about what I'm looking at so you can see the reasons why I'm saying what I'm saying as far as the forecast is concerned. And if you learn a little bit along the way, that's fantastic too. The other part about that is thank you for sticking with me. There's been so much great feedback and positive reinforcement about the material that I've been putting out there that I just want to say thank you so much for your viewership, your listenership, however you access it. And by putting a lot of this stuff on YouTube, it allows you to visualize and see things visually, what I'm seeing. And it just simply goes a whole lot better than just the audio medium. So thank you for everybody for tuning in. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I don't think this episode will be quite as lengthy as what I've been dealing with, but here we are, late April, and as we're headed into May, the pattern is definitely going to be changing, and thank goodness it is going to be changing. Now, before we get into the weather, a little bit of advertising here. If there's something I can do for you or your business, that's exactly how to reach out to me. I've got ag clients scattered from Montana to Texas, as far east as Iowa, and it's a pleasure to deal with every single one of you in the agricultural community, because the message about this is all about being actionable. Make it be meaningful so you can actually use this stuff and make better decisions. And I hope that we can actually be able to capitalize on some of this stuff that's going to be changing. So for the past 30 days, this is what we've been dealing with. These are the precipitation anomaly over the past 30 days. So we've done okay here across Northeast Montana. Actually talked to a client of mine, Todd Wagner, that's up around Glasgow, Montana, and he picked up between an inch and a half of rain over the past 48 hours or so. There was some snow up here. So folks up here in Northeast Montana have been capitalizing. South Central Montana has been doing okay. Right up here in the Golden Triangle of Northern Montana, not been as fortunate. Much of Wyoming hasn't been as fortunate. We've had a good chunk of Southeast South Dakota not be as fortunate either. Meanwhile, up here over North Dakota, we've been doing okay. And then areas farther south have obviously been a mess. Throughout most of the west and the southwest high plains here. That's Springfield. Over the past 30 days, that's a big goose egg, folks. Yeah, 0% of average. Now, a lot of folks participate annual forage, PRF, the pasture rangeland forage. So for some of these folks, they're just like, look, if we're going to be this dry, let's just zero this stuff out right through the end of this month and really bring things on into May. And I totally feel you about that. I would feel the same way. There's some areas here from Clovis up to around, Stratford that actually had a little bit better precipitation last week with this. So that was a little bit different. But the Eastern Panhandle, right there around Canadian, that's a big 5%. So things have been less than ideal. Obviously, the winter wheat crop has taken it on the chin, not only from the drought, but also from the freeze conditions that took place about a week ago when that storm system came through and the cold front moved through. But if you go farther east, I've talked to some folks here in the Concho Valley that have just been in a fantastic mood where they've been getting plenty of water. It's been exceptionally green. So that narrow window here from far South Texas all the way up here into the upper Midwest has been the really only benefactor here in the middle part of the country to this pattern. The Southeast has been terribly dry too. So it's imperative that we move away from the pattern that got us here and move into something that's a bit more favorable. And the reason being is because the drought has been continuing to expand and worsen through those areas. This is the latest short-term drought index that came out just a few days ago. And you can see eastern Wyoming, southwest South Dakota, most of Nebraska, Colorado, northern half of New Mexico, the Panhandle in West Texas, East and Southeast Texas haven't been great, despite the fact that the worst of that Southeast drought has been confined here. And then there's your little ribbon of moisture, and some of it has been very significant moving through. So what we need to do, once we start to cure this region here, I think everybody's going to feel a whole lot better, not just simply because we're shoving water in the ground, but because we're beating back this regional drought as we go into summertime, where a lot of times we just simply have to rely on thunderstorms to go ahead, not bigger organized storm systems that come out of the west. So I really see The next 30 days especially is super important in beating back the drought while we have the opportunity to bring these more organized systems out of the west, off the Pacific, to where they can capitalize over a wide area, not just the pockets where you get better thunderstorm development. So I think that's very important. And then if we lay the groundwork for that, there should be a lot of optimism as we extend into June. And I will show you the reason why there should be here in just a little bit. But let's take care of business first of all. The forecast upper level weather pattern from tomorrow, which is April 25th, through the 30th of April. And this is how our upper levels are going to be stacked. Big old closed low up here over south central Canada. Produced blizzard conditions up here across the prairies of southern Canada, even down into very far northeast portions of Montana where they had wind and snow. So that's the main event up there. And then we have another piece of energy that's off the coast of California. Subtropical jet is really starting to get going here. You also know we've got the pattern that kind of does this up around that closed low. So the thing that I'm most looking at is the southern branch of the jet stream right here, the subtropical jet, which is so absent a lot of times during a La Nina event. All right. But now that we've put La Nina completely to bed about a month ago, and we are steaming through the initial stages of this El Nino, and I said this last time that I was on the Desert Farmer podcast, we're seeing El Nino impacts right now. I think we are in El Nino right now. I've made no qualms about saying that, whether it's here on the Desert Farmer podcast or on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. I think the impacts that we're seeing right now that are go forward are taking us from where we are with this initial stages of La Nina, which we are obviously in, deeper into this, or this El Nino, I should say, into the stronger part of this El Nino that's going to take place as we get into the warm season. So that's one of the hallmarks of it initially. So as we put this into motion, notice what happens here. All right, we slingshot one piece of energy out through northeast Colorado and into the central and northern plains this weekend. All right, after we get that piece of energy out of here, what we do is we reload with this piece of energy that's off the coast of California into the southern branch of the jet stream. So we're still a little bit disjointed here in how these two streams are operating. A lot of times that will be the case with El Nino when you have a split flow that's taking place. But the thing to keep in mind here is after this initial wave ejects is what we're doing back here in the southwest. All right. Notice what we've got going on here with this. Okay. And we've got this split flow that's kind of going on like this, or even down like this. You can see the remnants of it. So I'm really interested in this trailing wave right here that's going to eject out of the southwest and have an impact, I think, over a good part of the plains. Now, that initial wave is going to be a severe weather maker. Sunday, Monday, maybe even a Tuesday of next week. You're going to be hearing headlines about that. This trailing wave may also be doing that. But here's what we're looking at in terms of the forecast precipitation anomaly from the 25th through the 30th. We're going to have some folks get some water that haven't had water. And I don't want to put specific totals in here. I think that's a fool's errand to do that at this point, because with the way the modeling is going, we've got the seasonal change going on. We've got the El Nino that's continuing to rapidly develop in the Pacific. I think the models, anything really past about, say, 3 days as far as details are concerned, they're very sketchy, very sketchy. So I'm more concerned about the pattern here, not just the individual details just yet, but we're going to bring some moisture here across northern Utah, northern Colorado, southern parts of Wyoming, out here into the Dakotas. Remember, I showed you this quadrant of South Dakota has been very, very dry. I think they're going to capitalize on some good water there. Most of Nebraska, I think, is going to get some water, and northern Kansas. Now, that's mainly tied to this initial wave that's coming out Sunday and into Monday and Tuesday. All right, so notice who gets left out of the fray here. Yeah, these guys farther to the south. We're even going to bring some moisture through this sector, which has been so dry. So these areas that are farther south and southwest, I think, are going to largely miss out on the benefits of that initial disturbance as they kind of focus themselves a little bit farther to the north. That's with that initial one. This is what the European Artificial Intelligence is saying too. The previous one was just from the regular European Ensemble. This is the Artificial Intelligence Ensemble. Kind of got the same story going on here. All right, a little bit drier out in western Nebraska, a little wetter east. Same dryness here. All right, and the same moisture coming out of Utah. And I say this all the time. The regular European ensemble is oftentimes a little bit too wet. The artificial intelligence ensemble sometimes a little bit too dry. So reality is pretty much right there in the middle. Now, let's look at the upper level weather pattern from April 30th through May 5th. There's our next wave. Here's our more wintry side, okay, of the flow that's still bringing down much cooler air, which is going to encompass most of the northern plains in the Midwest during that period of time. And this is mainly tied to our subtropical jet that's roaring along. Again, very El Nino-like to see something like this. And as we put this into motion, this wave of energy is going to move up across New Mexico and West Texas and then eventually be absorbed into this larger trough of low pressure that's going to exist across the eastern third or almost eastern half of the United States. So you might be saying, man, this wave doesn't look that significant as it's coming through. Well, we're talking several days out. And a lot of times when you're dealing with an ensemble product, it loses the individual, more intricate strength of that wave the farther you go out in time. It kind of washes that signal out just a little bit. But the fact that that energy is coming through in the area that it's coming through is a very good sign for folks farther south. And when we look at what the upper level weather pattern is going to look like here, all right, by the time we get toward the 5th, you can see little ridge bumps in there, and we have the trough that's like that. We also have the larger part of the ridge that's up here and then diving down there. There's still troughing that's taking place off the coast if I widen the view out here. So this ridge that builds in here, I think is going to be kind of transient, meaning it isn't going to be strong enough and long-lasting enough to dumb down the pattern. It's going to move farther east and allow more troughiness to come in from the west. So when you look at what the forecast precipitation anomaly is with that 30th through the 5th, see what happens here? Look at this. Okay? This is a huge change from what's happened during the course of the week. This area here was not in line to get much in the way of significant moisture at all. But as we've gotten closer here, that wave of energy has been coming through farther south. So what that does is it puts this area of southern Colorado, eastern New Mexico, West Texas, southwest Kansas, the panhandles, and areas farther east in a much better spot to reap the benefits from that secondary wave. And I talked to a lot of folks down here in eastern New Mexico and West Texas this week, and they were just, in terrible shape as far as morale, a lot of depression, agricultural depression. I will just flat out say it. That's exactly where a lot of folks are. So if we can capitalize on this pattern, and yes, I know it's a long ways out there, but just looking at what the pattern is showing currently, that is some real reason for some optimism, at least in the short term. This is by far some of the best widespread rain chances we've had in a long time. Now, I know why you would be skeptical, all right? I get that. But we got to look at what's going on here because I think there's some reason for some optimism. Now, the artificial intelligence ensemble, as I said, isn't as aggressive, but it's still showing the same signal through here. Dry up here, wetter down here, okay? Wetter down there. We're going to have to get closer to see what these individual details are going to look like. But the fact that we are actually bringing something far enough south, I think is a reason to get a little bit excited. Now, you might say, well, this is just a one and done. There's no reason to think that this is going to continue. Why would we have optimism to think that it's going to continue? I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to show that to you right now. And it has a lot to do with what I talked about in the last Desert Farmer podcast and the importance of the Southern Oscillation. All right. If you're new to the program and you didn't see my last program, I highly encourage you to watch it because I think it really was kind of some foreshadowing from where we're going and where we're going to, I should say. But the Southern Oscillation looks like this. This is a La Nina configuration up here where we have low pressure or rising motion here, and we have sinking motion here. High pressure over here, low pressure over here. That is associated with a La Nina. That's why we're in a position we're in a lot of the plains because of the drought, okay? But during an El Nino, the Southern Oscillation Index changes. We get high pressure over here and sinking air, low pressure over the eastern Pacific, and rising air. So when we have a La Nina, the southern oscillation is positive. When we have an El Nino, it is negative. And the getting away from that positive southern oscillation is a huge deal. And I'm not talking about, the noise that occurs in the southern oscillation pattern. You might say, well, Brian, what do you mean by noise? And I'm saying, well, individual tropical entities through the Pacific can have an impact on the southern oscillation, where it'll spike it in some areas and it'll lower it in the others. Bottom line, I'm not looking at that noise. I'm looking at the steady state of the pattern. And we can do that here over a 30-day outlook. And I'll show that to you here in just a second. But this is the Southern Oscillation Index monthly data, okay? I've got a bunch of years on here. This is where we are in 2026. I showed this to you last episode. Look at the positive values here, January, February, March. And I actually think, after we got past March, all right, the April index is going to be considerably lower. I'll show you why here in just a second. But if you're analoging and you look back through some of these years, all right, I'm most interested where we weren't positive. Look at last year, for example. March was awful in the Southwest High Plains. We had two huge wind events. We had blowing dirt, haboob, and we were in bad shape. Now, look what happened. The Southern Oscillation Index didn't go negative, but it didn't scream positive again until the fall. Well, when did the crux of this drought get going? Last fall. And then it's been perpetuated here through the winter and early spring because the Southern Oscillation Index has been positive associated with that La Nina signal. All right. Let's go back into 23. 23 was the last time we had a La Nina to El Nino transition. All right. Look what happened here. January of 23, positive. February, positive. We tried to go negative there in March, but we didn't fully accomplish that until May. And even then, it was kind of noisy through summer and even into the fall. The El Nino of 2023 and in early 24 wasn't a traditional one in the sense that it really didn't behave a lot like an El Nino should in the traditional sense. But what happened here, we got away from that extreme positivity of the SOI, and then in May, all hell broke loose in the Texas Panhandle. And it was just for about a month, and then they reverted back to the drier flow, and then there was better moisture for across some of the rest of the high plains because we didn't have a real stout positive Southern Oscillation Index. 2015, look at this. In 2015, negative, look at that. We started the El Nino in 2015 a lot sooner than where we are now. And 2015 was that classic east-based El Nino event. And look at this. Look at the negative indices there. 2015's El Nino was very, very strong, okay? And more classical. Let's go beyond that. What about 1997? Well, we had positive values of the Southern Oscillation Index through February. We crashed it in March, or started to, and then we really saw it crash after that. Look at these negative values. 1997, big year moisture-wise. Big in terms of shock, all right, in terms of that moisture. Went from dry to wet, wet to dry, full of extremes across the Western High Plains, all right? 1991, that was another transition year right there. Okay, we had positive values early, then negativity after that. Not extreme negativity like some, and I think that's because we didn't go into that stronger phase of El Nino until later, but transition, certainly. What about some other years here? 1982. We had positive values of the Southern Oscillation Index and very weakly negative values through April. And in May, we crashed it and continued to crash it. And it was a snap in the high plains. Okay, we went from very, very dry to very, very wet during the month of May when that Southern Oscillation finally crashed. Back in 72, somewhat similar. Look at the positive values here. All right. Then we crashed it, did better during the warm season, and we kept it pretty negative. All right. Because that El Nino was also fairly strong. 1965, not a classical crash until you got into April. We went from positive in March to negative there. Look at some of this value. Look at this value here. Okay. Very negative. Wet, wet summer. Some of the biggest rains on record in the high plains and flooding incidents happened during the spring and summer of 1965 after we made that transition. And even down here in 1957, you saw the same stuff go on. So I look for the monthly value of the Southern Oscillation Index when it starts to crash, when an El Nino is developing. That is usually a good signal for the Western High Plains. And you can see it right here. This is a Southern Oscillation value for the past 30 days, negative 8.44. So we were already, by late March, we were already starting to see that crash. This is where we were on March 26th, still above a positive 10, very positive. March was a train wreck. Most of April's been a train wreck for much of the plains, but we had to break that pattern. And since then, it has done nothing but crash, okay? And actually today's daily contribution, okay, the SOI, was at a negative 10. So we had to initially crash with that big warm up in the Pacific. And the next slug of warm water that's moving across the Pacific is not only going to keep the Southern Oscillation negative, it's going to make it even more negative. Step down process, you better believe it. That's how you have to roll with this when you transition from a La Nina to an El Nino. And you can see the monthly values over here, all right? Previous, near 8, positive 8 in January, 11 in February. You don't think there's any weather pattern hangover from that? Look at that. Now, March, April's going to look very different from March here. That's my point. So historically, when we see that value crash, that's when we can kind of say, hey, the fire's been lit. This is the trade wind forecast over the next couple of weeks. April 25th, right to May 9th. Remember, anything that is orange or kind of yellowish, these are westerly wind bursts. This westerly wind burst down here, after we get past the first, say, couple of days of May, that's a biggie. That is a biggie. And it's going to shove warmer water across the Pacific again. We had the big one that came through, prior to the 25th. Here's another big one that gets the party started again in May. So this is the last couple of weeks. At the surface, on top, below the surface, when we're looking at sea surface temperature anomalies. I'm just going to let this sit up here for a little bit because there's some points that I want to make. First of all, with what's going on at the surface. Here's where we started April 4th. Look at the blue that was still there. Adios. It's gone. Okay? Look at the warming that's taking place out here across parts of the Western Pacific. That warm water at the surface, all right, is only going to continue to get warmer. And look right here off the west coast of South America. Some of those anomalies are greater than 3 to 4 degrees C at the surface. Now, what's the importance of beneath the surface? Well, look at all of this. With this initial Kelvin wave that's moved through, these sea surface temperatures down here at about 150 meters are about 6 degrees Celsius above average. A lot of that warm water is going to surface. So all that does is continue to warm the surface. This is associated with that next westerly wind burst out here. This is an even stronger Kelvin wave than the one that's just kind of been moving through. So there's a lot of reinforcement here in this El Nino as it continues to really intensify, and its impact on the Southern Oscillation Index, because the more warm water that comes to the surface out here across the Pacific, the more negative and the more sustained negativity is found in the Southern Oscillation Index. This isn't just a blip. This is a full-on regime change in the Pacific Ocean, okay? How does that tie to the weather pattern, just say over the next month and a half? Well, we can use the Euro extended model here, and that's what I'm going to do. But I want to caution you that because of what's going on and the rapid changes that are taking place, there's some pretty big volatility in some of these 30 to 40-day products. The GEFS has an extended product too here. But for the sake of just the pattern argument, we're going to look at the European extended. This is the mean sea level pressure anomaly that's being forecast from early May right through early June. So all of this blue that you're seeing over here is lower than average pressure. Meanwhile, over here in Australia, we have high pressure, sinking air. Over here, lower pressure around the Eastern Pacific. So what you get over here is rising motion, enhanced subtropical jet. Over here, sinking motion, dryness. This is a huge change. I talked a lot about this in the previous episode of the Desert Farmer podcast, but I'm doubling down on this because it is so significant of a change as far as the weather pattern that we've been dealing with. That's over the next, well, really from the 5th to the 5th, okay? 5th of May to 5th of June. What you're looking at here is the velocity potential anomaly, way up at 200 millibars. I don't want you to get bogged down in the extreme science. Just know wherever you're seeing the browns, that's where you're seeing sinking air that's present in the atmosphere. And look at where we are right now. Across the West, across Mexico, look at all that sinking air, that negative, okay? Negative air, or not negative air, but negative precipitation anomalies associated with that sinking air, all right? That's what the brown represents. So when you see the brown, just think, rain chances aren't great. What happens over the next month? Let's put this into motion here. You see all the green materializing here across parts of the Eastern Pacific, sneaking up here into the southwestern part of the United States? That's due to that warmer than average water coming eastward across the Pacific, warming things at the surface, keeping the SOI negative, steepening the negativity of that SOI, and changing the weather pattern wholeheartedly, invigorating the subtropical jet stream, keeping the subtropical jet stream relevant across the Southwest and the southern Southwest plains and all the high plains for that matter. This is something that is a very favorable setup to keep rain chances regular in the forecast as we skate through May and head into early June. Now, is it all going to be perfect? No, it's not all going to be perfect. All right, it just isn't. There will be dry times. There inevitably will. But the more, and this is actually June 8th, the afternoon of June 8th. This is where the model is forecasting things to be by June 8th. You see all the brown over here over Indonesia, Australia? Again, sinking air. Over here, rising air, moisture, subtropical jet. Big change right there. So there's a lot of evidence here. What I'm getting at is that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that when we make this initial pattern change, it's likely going to continue as we go forward, especially as we head through May and obviously get into June. And the upper level of the pattern suggests it too. This is from the 5th through the 5th, all right? 5th of May through the 5th of June. Look at what we got going on here. You see this troughiness along the West Coast and off the Baja? Energy coming into the west. Subtropical jet stream kicking out right here. Now, farther north, we've got the split flow going on, right? Okay, like that. Down here to the south, we've got this going on before the two streams kind of phase up here across the Northeast. So this looks like a fairly active pattern. And I'm sure I know you've heard me say this, many times, is that May was going to be the turn month, right? Late April, May, steaming into June. But May was going to likely be the turn month for a lot of us. And I think that we're still very much on track for that, at least to put us in a whole lot better shape than where we've been. And this hasn't just been one or two model runs that have been showing this. This pattern has been present in the models for a long time. Whether I do individual work for you or you frequent this the Desert Farmer podcast, you know I've been talking about this for quite some time. One last thing, and then I'm going to leave you today. But when we look at the Madden-Julian oscillation forecast through late May, again, the Madden-Julian oscillation, very, very important in our 30 to 60-day weather pattern, all right? It is that big cluster of thunderstorms, a lot of times gets going over the Indian Ocean, and then it can circle across the equator. Doesn't always make it across to all the phases, and it won't this time, all right? But the MJO is a very, very important thing in that forecast. Different phases equal different things. Now, the European Extended's forecast right through May 24th looks like this. here's where we are now, over here, all right, in 23, 24. What it does is it cycles things around, keeps us in phase 1, briefly 2, but look what it does. It pops us out back here in phase 8 and phase 1. That's what the model wants to do. Very few members of the model keep the MJO over here. If you are in the Western High Plains and the Southwest High Plains, and for that matter, the plains in general, you want that MJO over here in 8 and 1. It may briefly come up here in 7, but you want it in 8 and 1, and I'll show you why in a second. The Bureau of Meteorology, okay, its product going through the 21st of May does the same thing. Does the same thing. Here's where we are. Cycle out of 1, briefly into 2, and look what it does. Pops us right back out here into 8 and into 1. So both models are doing that, and both models are keeping most of our MJO activity on the left side of the graphic right here. That's very, very important, because when you look at the composites from a precipitation standpoint, okay, let's look at 8. Here's 8 down here. Do you see that? What does 8 do? Well, it keeps these areas wetter in 8. Look what 1 does up here. It actually brings moisture here to the southeast part of the country, but it keeps the middle and parts of the west wetter than average, okay? West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, right up through the western part of the northern high plains. 8 and 1. You want the MJO in those 2 phases to be beneficial to us. Now, we spent a lot of time here in 6. Well, look where the moisture went in 6. It largely went like this. Do you remember how wet that was? Okay, that little window that I've shown you from parts of southwest Texas into the Midwest, southeast was in a drought. The west didn't see any moisture. But when we move, okay, when we move to 7, we start to spread that moisture westward. 8, even more so. And 1 focuses it there along with the southeast. So there's another reason to be encouraged when what the modeling is doing. And when you pair the historical significance of the cratering SOI, the active MJO in these phases that I've talked about, there's reason to be optimistic, my friends. I'm not an optimist, all right? I'm a realist for the most part. It's hard for a lot of folks to get optimistic in the pattern that we've been in with the drought. Drought sucks. I get it. So to summarize what I'm thinking about here, this active pattern is arriving, all right? Keep this in mind. It doesn't guarantee good moisture for everybody. There will be haves and have-nots. What the pattern does is put everybody in a better spot to reap the benefits of it. And if nothing else, much better chances are on the way. And some folks, they're going to jackpot out of this. They are going to get some significant water with this pattern. The forecast variability is higher than usual beyond 3 days. All right, it just is. That's just what's going on. So, and I'm talking about the individual details, maybe not necessarily the larger scale pattern, but the individual details. Those are going to have to be resolved almost every day, because in some cases they may be different. You get into thunderstorm season, a lot of times today's thunderstorm event and how it plays out determines how tomorrow and the next day's thunderstorm events are going to pan out. Winter's not over for some of us, all right? There's going to be some cooler air come in. There will be some snow from eastern Montana, western Dakotas, Wyoming, parts of western Nebraska, Colorado, all right? It's not over for some of us. I want you to be very cautious with your persistence bias. And persistence bias is looking out the window, seeing it dry, no rain chances in the forecast, and just thinking it's going to continue. Folks, if you've lived on the west and the southwest high plains, or really anywhere across the plains, you know how extreme the weather is, number one, but you can also know how quickly we can change from one extreme to the other. Don't let persistence bias get you down about this. I'm going to be watchful of confirmation bias. And what is confirmation bias? It is, I've been saying this for a long time. I'm saying it now. I will look for any evidence in the future to help me reinforce what I'm saying. I don't want to do that. If there are red flags out there, I want to see them. I want to bring those them to your attention. The only red flag I can find right now is what has caused your persistence bias, the drought, the very dry soil. Keep that in mind. A lot of times when we see weather models trying to break a significant pattern, they try to do it a little bit too much at first. All right. So we have to be cautious about this. Cautious optimism is what I'm striving for here. All right. And if you consume material on social media, weather material, consume weather material on social media or on the internet, there's going to be a ton of clickbait maps out there because they're only posting one member, the most extreme member of the model. You know, they're not using ensemble forecasting. They're farming your engagement. They're looking for your clicks, likes, and shares to make money off of you. Please beware of that. And I'll tell you another thing that's kind of in line with that. If you're using your weather phone app, if you're using your weather phone app to make decisions, weather-based decisions around your business in this pattern, you're going to be sorely disappointed because your weather phone app in this pattern and how things are changing is going to be more worthless than usual. All right? That's what I'm going to do for you. That's why I'm here. Okay? And that's how I kind of want to leave you on this episode of the Desert Farmer Podcast. And as I always say, if there's something I can do for you in your business, in the business of agriculture, or something centered around agriculture, please don't be a stranger. Hit me up on my cell. Email me. You can go right to brianbledsoeweather.com. You smash the blue button right there. Give me your phone number. Give me your email address. I will get in touch with you so I can go to work for you and start making a difference. Folks, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you today. And every day we do the Desert Farmer Podcast. If you have any feedback about this for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. If I don't hear from you soon, I'll be chatting with you again here real soon on the Desert Farmer Podcast. Be good.